Hey, how you guys doing, man? I'm back again on another episode of the I.T.Factor, and today, as always, I'm your host, Jeremy Robinson, and we have somebody special today, as always. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Clark. I am a data scientist, data analyst. I work at an emotion AI startup, and I'm excited to be here and talk about AI.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So first off, man, how are you? And before it's crazy, I know you. Look, man, it's crazy, man. It's a beautiful thing to have a network.
It is. I'm doing well, thanks. We got some okay weather in Boston, as you're familiar. I think it like snowed / rained yesterday. I don't know what it was, but it was just like slush falling from the sky. So we got some okay weather today, so it's not too bad. Doing my little Sunday routine, just cleaning up and taking the dog out for a walk and talking to you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I can't complain. I actually did an episode earlier with a guy that was from my hometown, and it went well, in person interview.
Okay.
It was good, man.
Busy man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now I'm packing for the holidays, so me
Okay.
and my fiance trying to get everything right so we can slide up out of here later on today.
Okay. Yeah, I was just in DC last weekend,
They bet.
visiting some friends. So
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, we'll be up there. We're going actually to Maryland on Thursday. Yep.
well, safe travels.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So man, so first off, man, tell me what led to your field, man, and like your study of occupation.
Yeah, so I have a non-traditional path to like data science and like artificial intelligence in general. I actually was a math teacher, but before that, I was like pre-law. So I was African American Studies and political science in undergrad. I wanted a major that had absolutely nothing, and I went to Northeastern, and I wanted a major that had nothing to do with math. And so I was just like, this is good. I like politics. I did my co-ops, the Northeastern Cooperative Program, where you take time off of school and you go work for 6 months. I did like co-ops at a law firm, at the White House, like on the Hill. Like I did a lot of political, like pre-law track. And then I don't know if you're familiar, but Teach for America.
Yeah.
But okay, cool. So we'll spare you all of that to say that I did TFA, kind of recruited me in, and at the time, like I'm big on mentoring, and I still mentor. And one of my mentees was graduating. I was like, oh well, actually, you know what, let me try this out. Like it feels good, and I'll go be a lawyer afterwards. And actually ended up teaching for 6 years. So I taught 2 years of high school math, and then like 4 years of middle and fourth grade math, middle school, and then fourth grade math. And then didn't really I struggled in the academic system, let's just say, like as the only Black male teacher at an elementary school, working with a lot of white women, where I'm just like, okay, well, you're criminalizing this child's behavior and I feel bad. So we're going to talk about my feelings. And it's just like a lot. So I ended up wanting to have a larger role, and I went to DC. And I became a data specialist for DC public schools. I was focused on high school graduation rates and like working with school leaders to use data to track students, but not like non-traditional tracking of like, oh, like if you're in honors or if you take this. It's more so like warning indicators for like students who are off track to graduate, attendance, grades. But really what was interesting and what really actually led me to the field was like trying to quantify and figure out these untangible, like I was a school teacher, I worked with school leaders, so they all know like kind of the problems that a lot of their students are facing. They know their students, but it becomes a hassle when they have to write down and figure out a plan to like solve this thing that they're like still running a school. And so it's kind of like my job to like translate all of that. And it was awesome. I loved it. For 2 years, we like increased graduation rates by like cleaning up the data. But ultimately, it led to the largest like I got fired because I was trying to stop what was the largest graduation rate scandal in DC public school history. Yeah, and so Nia, she's from DC, but it's just it was a really rough time for me because I loved the job. Like I was getting paid really good money to have. Like I had a badge, I had influence, and like people were listening to me because it was like producing results. But then ultimately, it became about people, and so I decided to step away from like this public service like mentality, went back to Northeastern for grad school. That's where we crossed paths. And was focused on like urban informatics and using big data about cities to Okay, so I guess it still had a public service mindset, but just using data to make the cities run better and more efficient. And I guess that studies, that learning more about that, and like helped me gear towards like what was Affectiva, which was a pioneer in emotion AI. But now we got acquired by Smart Eye, so I work with Smart Eye, and so that's like kind of my path of just like learning the power of data, using it to help students, but also help school leaders, and now seeing that data really is like the most valuable commodity like in the world right now. And so I don't know, just as I tell people like about how I got to the field, it's very non-traditional. Like if you would have asked me when I started undergrad, I'd be working at AI, I probably would have laughed at you. But now it's really cool, and I do feel like excited to be in the space at this moment in time because it's like transforming right now.
Right, right. And then that leads to the next question, actually. So why is it important for, black males to be in artificial intelligence right now? And like, because I asked this question because, I'm a computer scientist and an engineer. So I sit in those rooms now because I work for GM, and they talk about the AI, or they talk about Tesla and the self-driving car. And it's like a lot of these things don't argue, even with your phone trying to open up with your face, and it doesn't. If you're in the dark and you're a black person, it may not pick up the way it does. And I'm like, dang, we're not sitting in these boardrooms like or in these meetings to be able to do these examples to say, okay, a black person gonna use this product too. So how do you think that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're speaking to is like algorithm bias, I think, is like the technical term, but that's still very broad of like what exactly is bias, because we're all like, as human nature, we all have bias. That's like a reality, but it's really about mitigating it. And so like I think of the work with Joy from the Algorithmic Justice League, and like calling out some of the earlier prototypes, and like, excuse me, and of bringing alarm and issue to it. And so being a black male in the field like is super important. Like I run recruitment as well as run studies, and so when we think about recruitment, a lot of the reason why the algorithms don't work for black faces or in certain conditions is because, as you said, it's not just the boardroom, but also like R&D and the data pipeline of just like, well, whose idea was it to train this model like on all white men? Like,
Right.
and that's what you'll find often is no one's idea. This is where the bias comes in. They just didn't think about other people, which I don't know. I don't like to generalize there, but like that can be a result, be associated with certain characteristics of privilege, white privilege being one, but also male privilege, like it's intersecting. And so when I was looking in the field, I struggled because I come from this like social science background, emotional intelligence, and like I speak my mind. And so I'm around people who are just like, well, why are you bringing this up? Why is it about race? And it's like, well, it's not really my job to do that. And that was like mainly in school, in the classroom, like, but when I was applying, I really wanted to work for like a company that was like, I didn't want to work for a company that then was going to be in the news because like they had their biased algorithms. And so Rana, she's the co-CEO of Smart Eye, but the founder and co-founder and former CEO of Affectiva. She's a Muslim Egyptian American woman. Like the fact that she's a woman CEO, I'm just in awe, and I feel like I learned a lot from her just by being in her presence. But the other day, she was doing a Zoom call with Martin, the CEO of Smart Eye, and then Peter. So I'm using the first names because everyone's like international, got like names that I don't want to say wrong. Peter from iMotion's CEO, and they were having a conversation. And, so I'm in the LinkedIn chatting, and I asked a question, and she was like, "Oh, this is Jordan," and then she took like 20 seconds just like introduced who I was, what I do for the company, which is really, again, like mitigating algorithm bias and like running studies. And I was like, oh my God, she sees me, but also took that time to highlight it. And I don't know, I just think that was like, it's just who she is, but that intersection of her identities allows for her to create space for marginalized people to not only speak up, but to be seen and heard. And that's where I'm just like, I think that's like a more of a inclusive action that I attribute to women versus like being a woman versus being a man, because I don't know, just how it is. And so, yeah, like being a black man in this field, having opportunities to learn from other people and how they navigate this space, but also being there to insert myself has been very rewarding. And I mean, I'm pretty sure you're familiar, but like when you work in tech, the work-life balance is like they try their best to create space because they know they're hard workers and we're going to work a lot, but it's like, we have unlimited time off, like there's free lunch on Wednesdays and bagel Tuesdays, and so it's just like, I think it's cool to just be in this space as a Black man in tech and enjoy like wellness and like enjoy like the opportunity to innovate. And yeah.
Man, that's amazing, bro. Even with you telling me that, like just seeing that, and even me, where I work at, and seeing the differences, it's just like that's amazing to know that, you out here just making a change. So in that, I would say, what is the it factor, man? Why you do what you do?
I ask myself that question often. Let's see. I would say for me, it's probably like just my brain is very systems thinking. So like I'm always solving problems and like predictive analytically though. Like it can be like a burden or but it's also just a big blessing of like when I taught fourth grade, I knew who was gonna do what before they did it, like intuitively.
Right.
And that comes from like emotional intelligence and like having that interpersonal skill to be able to read somebody and not have to like sit down and reflect and like, oh well, why did they, this was like just knowing it. And so that just comes mainly, I shouldn't say it this way, but like from childhood trauma, I guess, but just like how I grew up shaped who I am. And like, so I try like to use it as like as a positive thing, I guess. And with that said, is like that's why I work in AI and emotion AI in particular, but it's like being able to like read people, but then learn, and I'm still learning, increasing my data literacy, my technology literacy to be able to like fuse the two. So it's like, oh, I could read somebody, but now I want the computer to be able to read somebody like I do, so that when I'm in a position to influence the space of AI, it's like, oh, well, it's like shaped off of me, or I know how it's like I inserted like these racial like eyebrow movements or some just things of like quantifying or like explaining something that just no one else can think of. And that's why I'm doing it.
I like that, man. Even the way that you kind of can explain that, and that's why I know you can explain. So, in you doing that for the viewers, man, how is that pieced together in like a day to day, like a weekly time? How does a week or a day look for you as in your job field?
Yeah, let's see. So we just started back up running studies. I mean, I'm sure you aware COVID like kind of halted everything. But it was also presented opportunity. So like I automated a lot of our recruitment processes and like data pipelines, like just to ensure data quality. And that like that freed up a lot of my time. I would say like before we got acquired, I was running a Drowsy Lab. So I was basically people were staying up all night at home, and then they were coming in and but they were like filling out surveys and like doing these things, these small tasks at home, and then come into the office and drive this driving simulator. And like we have cameras set up, and they're like falling asleep, and we're capturing like natural signs of sleepiness, of drowsiness, and like labeling it, things like that. And so I'd be in the lab from like 7 a.m. until noon. We'd have 2 participants, and then I would go home and like do more recruitment stuff, like work from home, take my dog to the dog park. But also I'm just like thinking like about new studies that we have or new ways to like recruit people. And then outside of that, I'm creating just different data pipelines like for myself, and doing like my own quantified self research. I pretty much track everything that I can think of. Yeah, to like just understand how it collects data, but then to like spark, like I guess my newest device is like the Lumen, and it checks your metabolic rate. It's really just like a breathalyzer, but it like determines if you're burning CO2 or carbs, like or fat or carbs, and it determines that by your CO2. So I was like, okay, cool. But in my head, I'm also like, oh well, that could be used for like a study. That could be a biometric point for like nutrition. I'm also like big in the cannabis research, and so now I'm like, wow, like I track like what I smoke, what strain I smoke, but also when you throw this in there, now you can use cannabis to track, like to measure metabolic. So it's like I'm just thinking and trying to acquire more tools to. This is a smart water bottle, tracks what I drink water. Like it's like things like that. Yeah, like how much I drink. Down. My favorite aspect about that is like when I'm sleeping, and I have an Aura ring, tracks my sleep. When I'm sleeping, I wake up mainly to go get water to go to the bathroom. And it's going to the bathroom because I drank a bunch of water at like right before I went to bed, because I knew that I'm gonna wake up and drink water. But it's like timestamp, so it's see like 3, 4 a.m. I'm like drinking like 20 ounces of water. And it's just like, well, I know why it is. But the point just to say is like, that's like, I didn't do a 24-hour cycle, but maybe I did. But that's like a normal day for me. Just like go to the lab for a little bit, run some studies, go home, live, and think of ways to produce more data.
Man, that's amazing, bro. That sounds good. It sounds like you like it. And it's very intuitive how you just sit down and like, well, how can I make this water bottle more beneficial to my life? How can I, so the fact that you're doing that, I know that's amazing, man. Just to see
Thank you.
how
Thank
it
you.
goes, man. So like what is one of your ultimate life goals?
Yeah, I saw that question. I was like, so I had like I'm an alpha brother of Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and when I like as I think about this journey of where like of data and how I got here, like when I was leaving my job, well, getting terminated for my job, I was having like these like intense like dreams, and that's what like, but I was just like, what is this, like it was mainly about like VR and like using VR as a platform to like help people be heard, because ultimately I was just like, well, I love my job, I love what I'm doing, I love the impact, but I don't feel heard. And that's like a big thing for me, just again from childhood trauma, but also like low-key was kind of right, like largest graduation rate scandal in public school history, DC public school history. And I'm not like proud of it, but it's just to say, it's like this could have been avoided. And it's like we all have these stories, and like how can we leverage transformative technology? So I'm like having these dreams, and like, Martin Luther King is a brother of the 17th House, the Sigma chapter that I'm from. And so I was just like, well, he was onto something as he went more towards like ending poverty. And I believe in like a universal basic income. And I believe that we can leverage AI to pay people for the data that they are producing, and like provide them like a minimal, like a universal basic income. And like that's like an ultimate goal, is to like leverage like VR and say, hey, you could like use virtual reality as to become like an immersive storyteller, tell your story, and we'll pay you for it. But also like, hey, here's some tools, so Aura ring, a smart water bottle, like, because ultimately the future of work is about wellness. So it's not just, it's a lot, but like that's like I'll just say like ultimate life goal is to see a universal basic income model implemented, like leveraging AI. We'll just say it that way. I know I threw in VR, but like we don't need to go down that rabbit hole.
All right, I like that, man. And that actually leads into the next question, man. So in a more open like conversation wise, why is it important, you know, to learn AI, and like what you just stated, wearing a ring and saying, hey, we're trying to get to this. Now, I know with GM, we're trying to get zero emissions, right? But in actuality, it's like I want to make it easier to where I can crank my car up outside, and I don't have to mess up the environment by doing it and drive it around. I can get out my car and not worry about anybody taking it because this is happening and this is in place.
Mhm.
So those type of things. So why is that important, you would say?
Yeah, I think the understanding, because we have the opportunity to shape and influence how AI is implemented, like not just like on our own individual basis, because like it's like data privacy, but also like on a global scale. And because I get into conversation, like, so I was in DC last weekend, went to brunch with some frat brothers, and this conversation comes up, and they're so afraid of AI. Like, it's very like, I'm like, oh, you watch too much Terminator or too much Black Mirror, which I'm just like, what? I love Black Mirror. Like, people are terrified of it, and I'm enthralled,
I
but I
love
get
it.
why they're afraid. With um but at the same time, if you understand AI, you realize like, oh well, that's just an over dramatic dramatization. Like, AI is really dumb. Like, the things that we call AI now are just really basic. And like right now we're running a study where we're training, we work in focus on automotive AI. So we're training models to understand if you're eating or drinking, like distraction behind the wheel. And it's just so, I'm just like, oh my God, we have to train all these people. Like, look at this target, now take a bite. Like, look at this target, now take a sip. And it's just like really basic things. And then, we have a team in Egypt that is like labeling it to ensure that the label was correct and all of this. But like, so we're a long ways off from like this like
What we think we're
dystopian
gonna get.
future.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, if we don't want that to happen, then you need to be in the space now and influencing it now. So that way we don't have like a bunch of cars that don't recognize Black people, because like you didn't have somebody like me in a position to be like, hey, and no, we were wrong. My manager before this, like they were worried about diversity, but it's not just like worrying about it and being aware of it, like interacting with clients, like making people feel comfortable, enlightening them, like, and I don't have to do those things. Like, you come in, we'll pay you, and like bye. But it's like, oh, did you know that you're like increasing like the diversity of data sets to ensure that it works for people like us? it's like the biggest recruitment. Like people feel good that they're like getting paid to sit in a car and eat an apple. And I'm like, I'm glad you feel good. It's mainly because you probably feel enlightened because you're understanding like the role that you play in AI. And I'll just use this other point, like Facebook and the meta, like or rather Facebook slash meta. And people are so like they're not afraid of it, I would say, but they are ignorant to the role that they play in allowing Facebook to do what it does. And that just means like, well, Facebook just harvests your data and a lot of data about you. It's like, and they're not really like covert ways that people just don't know them. Like if you're not a social science researcher who's like, or like an engineer or somebody in this field academically, I wouldn't expect you to hear about like sociometric meters that like use like Bluetooth to determine the proximity of you to your coworkers because they're doing a study. Like I just read a book on that, people analytics. It's really interesting. But I was like, wow, that's basically what Facebook is doing. It's just doing a study on a bunch of people, but the people aren't aware of it. And that's what's like, once you become aware, you can use that knowledge or awareness to like mess up the algorithm, so to speak. Like I use Facebook as my metacognitive narrative psychotherapy is what I call it. It's a journal. I know, like, because I know how to download it later. And so it's like, I don't necessarily do it for likes. I just do it for reactions, if that makes sense. And so if I post something, then I'm like thinking about it on like a grand timeline story mode. I don't need to get into that. Just to say, it's important to know about the products that you're using so that you aren't just a consumer, but rather are able to take like something like Facebook, because it's great. Oh my God, when you download the data from Facebook, it's nice and neat and it's labeled and it's like, and I didn't have, all I had to do was post it. All I had to do was use it. And that's where it's like, if more people become aware of it, then the algorithms won't use them, they'll use the algorithms, and they'll either have Facebook and these other companies will have to adapt and evolve with like our evolved consciousness, or like you'll just kind of be a consumer for the rest of your life.
I can understand that, man. I always think about that. How can I make it better and get it to where I'm finessing them? They're not finessing me. And I can also make some bread, make some money off of it and get some people to know about it. Cause I always get that with me starting the show. People ask, hey man, your numbers here. Like I always don't focus on the numbers because I focus on some of the content that I'm putting out. Because the more content that I put out, a lot of these social media networks definitely look at it and be like, oh, wait a minute. So
When every video that you do, that's video analytics, and like I was just debating, like I'm trying to add another tech, but the Whoop, not the Whoop, the Halo, Amazon Halo. I mainly only want that because of the tone detection, and it like determines, like, because I got diagnosed PTSD, and so it's like sometimes I'm not aware. This is where it's like makes no sense. Like I'm super aware, hyper aware of everything, but then I'm not aware of like when I'm depressed. Well, I'm depressed unless like somebody's around me like, hey, you're depressed. I'm like, I am. But like point is like, and when I reflect, I can hear it in my tone. And the reason why I said that is like, well, you're producing all these these videos and these great content, but like just think about like the energy that you have to produce, like the tone that you're into it, like, right, like that you produce into it, like the interactions that you have, and that's all like adding potentially to somebody. I could download that and like run analytics and like train it. And so it's like, my future is like the more stuff you put out there, the more good stuff you put out there, like people should get paid for like their emotional reaction. Or just not there yet, but like I do think that like, like influencers and like that whole like what is it called, not hustle, side gig economy or whatever, like that's like a preview of what is to come when people realize just how powerful their data is.
Mm-hmm. That is true, man. So, and I would say, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I guess go more along the lines, where do you see like your video, your show, like where do you see it going in like terms of like evolution of like society, but also like technology? Like is VR like a space that you would like venture into, or like, I guess just where
Okay.
your hopes with
I
the
hope I
I-Factor?
can say that I want that podcast to get to a point of where I'm getting people in the UK, like Canada, to see my show, right? And that means something. It's like, dang, okay, it's getting out the country, man. It's good. But I also want to get to a point to where it's more of a network outside of LinkedIn for like people of a minority, like African Americans, or pretty much anyone to see like hey, these are the professions that we do, and it's multiple professions. This is how you could do it, and had that reach out point versus trying to log into a LinkedIn and say, okay, this Jeremy, okay, he do development. Oh, he went to Clark. Oh man, he went to North. Oh, I can't do that. So I want to get it to that point, and also bring it to your point of saying they seeing our interaction, seeing how upbeat we are about talking about this stuff, and want to get involved and say, man, I'm gonna do that. Okay, he doing a podcast. Okay, look, this is something that I want to do. Oh, he works in AI. Hey, that's something that I want to do. So I want to be able to do that, and also be able to bring people like yourselves to something like a TED Talk in the future. And we have these get-togethers where all of us get together and just have a conversation to see how we can raise money and help out to keep these things growing, like the I.T.Factor, and also scholarships, things of that nature. So that's what I'm in, man. Trying to
Ooh,
do
I'm with it. I stand with you in solidarity for collective liberation, man. Like, it's real. Well, I wish you well. Thank you for like reaching out and like asking me to be on the show. And it's funny that we went to Northeastern at the same time, and like we both know Nia, and like I'm happy that now that we're in each other's network. It's cool.
So, man. Well, I'll talk to you soon, man. You have a good rest of your day, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, man.
You too.